All right, last presentation of the day here, and then we can go to the after party. We got Jamison Budacki, and he's going to be talking about NetFlow for incident response.
Can everybody hear me? Good? Good, good. More? Better? Good? All right, good enough. So obviously I'm going to be talking about NetFlow for incident response. My name is Jamison Budacki. I'm a senior information security analyst with Erie Insurance. Before that, I worked 5 years at Cisco Systems. I was a information security engineer on their incident response team. My primary role there was the CSIRT's NetFlow deployment. So let's get started. So today's agenda, first I'm going to talk about what NetFlow is, give a general overview and how it fits into incident response. Then we're going to move on to talking about collecting flows. This will include choosing a collector, where to collect the flows in the network, as well as an example of a NetFlow cache, as well as the performance impacts of turning on NetFlow and exporting NetFlow. Then we'll lastly discuss various examples, example cases with NetFlow, and we'll finish off with a few lessons learned from past experiences. So what is NetFlow? NetFlow is a form of telemetry that is pushed by various networking devices. It was first developed by Cisco in '96 and embedded in most iOS platforms. It was first used for monitoring traffic and network planning. It was primarily used by network service providers for QoS, but NetFlow can actually also be used for security monitoring and is a great way to gain situational awareness within your environment. The best analogy for NetFlow is like a phone bill, whereas traffic capture is more like a wiretap. So we can learn a lot from studying a network phone bill. We can learn who's talking to who, over what ports and protocols, how much data was transferred, what was the speed, and for what duration. So over the years, Cisco has created 9, or depending on who you ask, 10 versions of NetFlow. V1 was the original implementation. V2, 3, and 4 were never released. 6, 7, and 8 were kind of never really adopted either. The two key ones are V5 and V9. The most common is V5, but the only setback on that is it's restricted to IPv4. V9 is template-based. It does support IPv6, and it's actually the basis for NetFlow's cousin, IPFix. NetFlow can come in sampled or unsampled. Sampled is basically a subset of the conversation. It's like reading every 15th word on a page. Unsampled is full collection. It's like reading every word on the page. Sampled is good for network performance monitoring. Excuse me. Unsampled is ideal for security monitoring. So NetFlow works best in a combination with other technologies such as IDS, IPS, vulnerability scanners, event logs, antivirus, and even full packet capture. So a typical flow of events you get an alert from your IDS. It's a primary alert source with its passive signature based. The same is true for AV to some extent. You get an alert, then you would take the alert and run a NetFlow report and we'll kind of get into that later on. But during the investigation, you also figure out what hosts are affected. Then you can go into your event logs as an investigation tool. They can be filtered down as needed. Vulnerability scanners can kind of give you an idea of any potential attack vectors or unpatched systems. Full packet capture can be utilized for any deeper analytics. So there's other vendors that have flow-based technologies. Juniper has JFlow, Huawei, HP, and 3Com use NetStream, and even Citrix has AppFlow. Now we'll move on to talking about collecting the flows. So in basic terms, flows are exported from a router and captured by a collector. They're sent over UDP on port 2055 by default. They can be analyzed on the fly, or they can be stored in binary files. Flows can also be forwarded or fanned to other collectors. Most routers have a limitation on the number of destinations you can output to. Cisco, in most cases, is 2. You can also send multiple flows through a single IP. This is also a good method for improving redundancy in flow collection. Data files, like I alluded to earlier, can be analyzed by various tools. They can be loaded into a database, or you can have ad hoc queries run against them. So now the first step is choosing the system itself. Some concerns around it are scalability, what's your flow rate per minute in your network, maintenance, how supportable is your solution, are you going to get any vendor help, or are you on your own? Say, for example, you have a collector that goes down, and are you going to have a vendor that's going to overnight you a new collector and you can just place it in your data center that day? Or are you going to waste time finding a new host, compiling the code, and setting everything up? Also, another thing around maintenance is, in my previous experience, there was only 1 or 2 people that knew the tool in and out. A commercial solution offers you the ability to spread the knowledge a little better. Some other key concerns are data retention. What's the number of days you want to look back on? Ideally, you want to have at least 90 days of retention for incident response. Performance is another concern. How fast does it take for your queries to run? And does it work when you need it most? If you're spending 15 to 20 minutes waiting for queries to come back, you probably need to either fix your current solution or find a better one. And of course, the big one is cost. So since disk space is a big concern, a general rule of thumb is for every 1 meg of storage, for every 1 meg of storage that you have, you need 1 meg of storage for every 2 gigs of network traffic. So another thing you're going to want to do is consider your network topology. Since NetFlow is UDP based, you're not going to want to send flows from India all the way back to Cleveland, because some flows may not make it back. Also, you need to fan out flows if needed, as I alluded to earlier. So like I said, it really comes down to a freeware solution or a commercial solution. So some great freeware solutions are listed. OSU Flow Tools is a great one. The only drawback is it only supports v5, so you're going to want to use NFDump and NFSend to kind of fill that v9 hole. Also, a great front end for OSU Flow Tools is Flow Viewer and Flow Grapher. Some other tools are Silk, which is actually created by the Carnegie Mellon CERT team. It supports both v5 and v9. NTOP is another one. It's kind of known to be limited out of the box, but the great news about most of these tools is they're obviously free, they're fairly easy to use, and they're well documented. Commercial solutions are led by Landcope and Plixer. Landcope has more of a security focus, while Plixer is known for traffic analysis, but Plixer has been really starting to get into more of a security focus. And of course, Arbor Networks is the 500-pound gorilla with more of a DDoS focus. And actually, interestingly enough, this is the exact position that I'm in now with my current employer. I'll probably have to prove NetFlow's worth with a freeware solution, then convince them to pony up the money to buy a commercial solution with added benefits. So where in the network do you want to collect flows? You want to collect flows at the choke points, much like an IDS deployment. You want to, at the ingress and egress points of the network, with the furthest aggregation point from the corporate network. Those are clouds, but you can't really see them that well. So ideally, the internet gateways and the data center gateways. So this is a NetFlow cache example. It's a basic representation of a cache flow on a router. So if data comes into a router, a NetFlow cache is created, and the data keeps moving out. So in step 1, you can see that it's created, and there's the who and the who, from who to where, and ports, time, all that good stuff. And then a flow will expire. So there's two primary ways a flow will expire: an inactive timer. So if a flow stops sending information for, I think the default is 15 seconds, the flow will be stopped. And an active timer, the default is 30 minutes. An active timer is basically will be called whenever, say a flow is, a traffic flow is 60 minutes long. After 30 minutes, the flow is going to be stopped and then either putting to cache or then finally exported out. So really the key for these is having a collector that is going to stitch the flows back together to make in a useful conversation. Also, once the NetFlow cache is full, the oldest flow is going to be deleted first. So the next step is really exporting the flow. It's you call out the version, the destination, and the port, and then the UDP packets are sent off to the collector. So 30 flows there's about 30 flows in a 1500 byte packet. So exporting NetFlow is actually pretty simple. It basically consists of telling the router which version of NetFlow. Well, first of all, you have to make sure NetFlow is enabled on your router. We like to kind of suggest to the networking team to have NetFlow turned on so you kind of avoid the whole conversation of a performance hit and all that. So then you're going to want to export the flows. So exporting a flow is basically consists of setting the version that you want, the interface that you want the flows to go out of, and the destination and the UDP port that you need. Some of the optional items is this is where you can set the active and inactive timers, and you can always verify your device configuration by doing show IP flow export and show IP route cache flow. So you have no gear in your network that supports NetFlow. Is that a pro? Are you screwed? No. There's various freeware and commercial solutions that will capture Ethernet frames and process them into NetFlow records. These devices are usually connected to a span, tap, or mirror port on a router or switch. I believe some of the freeware solutions are, off the top of my head, nprobe, and I know that Landcope has something called a flow sensor for on the commercial side. So the performance impact of NetFlow. NetFlow the processing overhead for NetFlow is fairly minimal. It's a very efficient protocol. As you can see, the red line is the router CPU, and the green line is the router CPU with NetFlow turned on. An interesting fact here is on a router outputting 20 gigs of NetFlow data a day and 800 plus active flows, the NetFlow process consumed by the CPU is less than the SSH process during a 5-minute interval. So to kind of put that into a picture for you. All right, now we're going to kind of talk about some example cases, and then we'll follow up with some lessons learned. So a great case scenario here is to detect a host that's scanning. Basically, you're going to run a NetFlow report for hosts with multiple connections to many destinations over a short period of time. You can exclude ports on specific hosts, such as 53 on your DNS server. This will help to identify a machine or a malicious user on the network. So in all of these case scenarios, the key thing to remember is a lot of these tools will allow you to set up jobs that run reports, and these reports can either be emailed to you and they can be run on a certain interval and any time of the day. And also some of the commercial solutions will actually send alerts as they're happening to your email or however you want to see an alert. So detecting a botnet. So say you have a host that is identified as infected through either IDS or AV. You're going to want to run a NetFlow report to determine where the infected host was connecting and what the command and control server was to find out the IP and the ports that were being used. So in this case, you can see the infected host is connecting to the command and control server over a certain port. Part 2 of that is, since we identified the command and control server as a bad guy, we're going to want to run a NetFlow report to see all the connections that are outbound from your organization to the command and control server over a specific port. This is very helpful in finding other compromised hosts on your network and helps you to reduce the mean time to know about any other incidents. Trace spoofing, this is one that can be run on the router itself in the cache. So say, basically you're gonna run a query directly on the router to determine the source of the source interface of the traffic. So you'd basically do that with show IP cache flow and include the IP address. And you can do this on the next hop router, assuming that CDP neighbor is enabled. Actually, Team Cymru has a great walkthrough on their website about how to do this. I believe I have it listed in my resources at the end. Another example is finding a host that is being NATed. So in this situation, a router is providing NAT services to the internal host. The external XP, the external IP is the 64 one listed. You receive a complaint from an external organization claiming that one of your hosts coming from the external facing IP is downloading some protected copyright protected material. And the XLET tables show no concurrent connections to the victims. So NetFlow can show all the connections to the destination before NAT. This can help you mitigate the issue on the correct host and tie it down to the correct user as well. So firewall and ACL audit. So NetFlow can be used to validate traffic flow from one area of your network to another for policy reasons. So think about a data center to the internet traffic, or traffic that is subject to regulatory compliance such as HIPAA or PCI. And obviously a firewall is configured to only allow specific services on specific ports. So you're going to want to run a NetFlow report showing all traffic. You can exclude, you're going to want to exclude the traffic that you allow. In this example, you can see the ACL is letting a host talk over port 19504. This is good for detecting compromised hosts establishing connections. It also helps you to determine how an ACL will affect traffic. Monitoring a darknet. So assuming your organization has a darknet of unallocated IPs set up, you can actually run a query for all connections communicating to your darknet. In this example, there's a host communicating over ICMP. This is great for detecting probes on your network, and it's a really easy way if you have a darknet set up. Bad IP list. Say you get a external intelligence from a trusted source such as law enforcement or a colleague. They send you some information about a bad IP, and you don't really want any of your hosts communicating with it. What you can do is obviously run a NetFlow report to all connections to the external IP. Then you can dig further into your investigation as to why these hosts were communicating to that bad IP. NetFlow can also help you discover a possible tunnel. So think about an HTTP request. The client, in this example, the client is sending more traffic than the host. For example, so imagine the HTTP traffic where the client is sending more traffic than the host. This is contrary to how the protocol works. The client usually sends a small amount, a get, a head, a post, to the server, and the server usually sends a larger amount of data back. This unusual activity, in this case it's over port 80, is likely to indicate a possible source of data exfiltration or unauthorized use. Large file transfers can be detected by NetFlow as well. You can set up a threshold for whatever you want it to be, in this case 100 meg. So you can have a report that comes back and says, hey, this user's sending over the threshold amount of data, and this is also another indication of possible data loss. Long-running sessions, this is kind of the low and slow data exfiltration or communication to a command and control server. So NetFlow can determine a long-running session to the internet from a data center host. In this example, the data center host has flows that is lasting 5 hours and is only sending 5 packets per second. This is something that you're going to want to investigate further and is kind of an anomalous behavior in the network. So protocol anomaly. NetFlow can determine when a host has a TCP session with less than 3 packets and the TCP flags are set incorrectly. In this example, the infected host is sending 50 packets, but all the flags are reset packets, and the traffic is not sourced from a standard application. This could possibly be the work of a packet generator or communications from botnet clients out to their respective hosts. This is another one of those things that you're going to want to look further into. Peer command and control connections. This kind of goes along with finding botnets. You run a report and you find out that you have 5 hosts that are communicating to a command and control server. You take it another step further and you run reports for each of the hosts and all their outbound connections. In this example, say the host all 4 hosts connected to a download server, and once you sift through all the other ports, you find out that there's actually another server in common, and this server is actually a secondary command and control server. So a few lessons learned. Setting a time zone to UTC for all your networking device and using NTP helps out greatly. It really helps out, it really prevents having to reconcile times and issues during an investigation. Freeware solutions are difficult in larger organizations, mostly because of the scalability issues, data retention issues, and also, as I alluded to, the time spent maintaining solutions. In the virtualization environment, multi-tenant hosts, usually it seems that they needed to be required to be on their own VLAN in order to capture flows effectively. This is where you're going to want to lean on your vendor to explore VM-based collectors. A lot of them are moving into this area as well. Also, after an investigation, there's a couple of questions you should ask yourself. Like, do we have any gaps in coverage? Do we not have NetFlow deployed in certain areas? Do we have the right kind of data feeds coming in? Also, if there are any NetFlow reports that are particularly useful, if there were, you should think about scheduling them and running them on a routine basis, and getting reports directly from the collector as needed. So, in summary, NetFlow is a powerful investigative tool that allows detailed accounting of network traffic. It is very powerful on its own, but it works better with other data sources and to help you paint a full picture of an incident. We have seen that enabling NetFlow really doesn't impact the performance of the router. And lastly, NetFlow can be used as a primary investigative data source. Without it, we may not be able to paint the full picture of a network compromise that we encounter. So some of the references here are pretty good. The first one is actually from a former coworker. This is more details about setting up OSU flow tools for NetFlow and incident detection. The Cisco NetFlow technical overview is really good. There's the Team Cumry tracking a spoofed IP address walkthrough, and there's also a pretty good SANS paper on using NetFlow and applying it towards an investigative model. So I guess kind of breezed through that. A little nervous, but any questions? Okay. Thank you. Absolutely. This was